Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Seven. We are on Roku, live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron David Poston. I want to thank you all, our viewers there on our new international Noahide network on the Roku station. I've played Beyond the Seven many times so far with Rabbi Poston. Hopefully you're familiar with who he is. He's the founder of Yiboneh in Jerusalem. He does a lot of outreach there, and we've been at these broadcasts now almost a couple of years now. But of late, we've been doing a series, a well-known series called The 48 Ways to Wisdom, and today we're doing part 29. So those of you on Roku, if you want to interact with us, you're welcome or invited to come to social media onto the Noahide World Center Facebook or YouTube page. So that's Noahide World Center. They're kind enough to let us broadcast with there, and Rabbi Chaim Goldberg there is my rabbi, and he lets us broadcast there. So it's always beautiful, but it's always a joy to be with Rabbi Poston in Jerusalem. Rabbi Poston stays up real late. It's 11:30 p.m. in Israel after Shabbat. And Rabbi Poston, you're live on the air. I want to thank you for this class. I love the 48 Ways to Wisdom, and we got part 29 today. So I'm going to just turn it over to you, Rabbi. You're live on the air with even our Roku channel as well.
Thank you very much, Dan. I want to just welcome everybody who's watching right now and whoever comes on later and watches it as a recorded video. First of all, congratulations on this new Roku. I don't know.
We hope it grows and touches people's lives.
Breaking through the cyber streams and getting the word out, because that's what it's about, right? Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. From out of Jerusalem comes the Torah. I know you have also speakers from around the world, but Baruch Hashem. So we're here in Jerusalem. We're happy. It's Shavua Tov. It's Motzi Shabbat, Saturday night. Shabbat is over. It's always like a little bit of, I'm not going to say a downer. It's not a downer, but it's like, you just let Shabbos go. It's just unbelievable, uplifting experience. Last 25 hours. And so we also have Malava Malka. We also escort the Queen, right? It's an amazing experience after Shabbat as well. We had a great time at Havdalah. We had some guests. We laughed. And we said Dvar Torah, words of Torah throughout Surah Shlishit, the third meal, the final meal of Shabbat. And I'm just happy to be here with you now.
Well, it's our pleasure. You've been sharing wonderful material with us.
I just want to point to the book behind me, The 48 Ways to Wisdom. This is based on a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in the 6th chapter. The 48, let's say, not just ways, drachim, but ways to acquire Torah, right? We left Egypt, the Israelites left Egypt, and it took a 49-day journey till we received the Torah on the 50th day. And these are the ways which one should, and it really anybody,
integrate,
wants to acquire wisdom, should integrate in their lives. The word in Hebrew is kinyan, to make an acquisition of this particular trait. And I really feel as I go deeper and deeper, I don't think I can do the justice that Rav Noach Weinberg, when he spoke with his jovial, personality, very charismatic, and the way he spoke to the series that is on tapes, which you can listen to as well. He spoke to young college students, and he spoke their language, and he gave examples. And I just never feel that I could give, I'm not trying to copy him in that sense, in his personality. So my way of delivery is very different. We go through a lot of source material at the end. I try to give over most of what he says in his book and some touch on the points that he speaks about in his actual lectures. But this is one, I say, as I get further and further, it's like harder and harder for me to feel like I made a real kinyan. And that's the goal of preparing the shiurs, to review what I've learned all those years that I was in the yeshiva and that I hopefully acquired some of these. And I think, like we call it subconsciously, have put into practice. I really have tried, conscious.
You're being humble. We really appreciate you, Rabbi
No,
Poston.
but this one is really hard because it's called not taking credit. So in Hebrew, it's Eino Machzik Tova Liatzmo. And there's two different ways we're going to look at it. Number one, we're talking about arrogance. If someone takes credit. Now, just try to imagine for a second, because this is the way I'm looking at it. I'm in a partnership with God, right? Yes. I have a job in this world, but I have a senior partner, okay? Now, I have a role to play, but he has a greater role to play. So when I accomplish, let's say what we said, protocol, we have a Torah, right? This is what God asked of me to do. And whatever else I set out in my life to accomplish, and I hit those markers where I've accomplished it, am I going to take credit, or am I going to really take pleasure in the fact that I'm a partner, I have a senior partner, and he's doing most of the work? And he has already done most of the work, and he's doing most of the work. All the energy, all of the cheshek, even the ideas that I have sometimes, see, this is me taking credit again, comes from him, right? All of a sudden, whether you're daydreaming or you're in your sleep or you're in meditation, and you come across this unbelievable, wow, this is going to change the world. This is going to make such a mark. And then who's going to take credit for that? Well, remember, he put that idea in my head. So always. The main thing is, in the first idea we're going to talk about, is basically giving credit to where credit is due and taking pleasure, right? Because we all have self-worth. We all have an issue with self-esteem. And we're not going to belittle it, but we do need to give the credit to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, to the Holy One, blessed be He, and not take full credit, and not even take credit, at least for ourselves, but take pleasure in our accomplishments. That's going to be for sure. The other idea, and we'll talk about this hopefully towards the end, remember, it's a partnership, but don't retain the credit. In other words, all the goodness that I've accomplished and acquired, I shouldn't hold on to. I should give it away. Now, in terms of wealth, if only I won the lottery, I'm going to be such a big philanthropist, right? That's my dream. What happens to most people when they win the lottery? They go broke. I don't know. They got cousins from abroad.
People come out of the woodwork. Yeah.
They're not using the money wisely, and before you know it, they're not only broke, they're in debt. Their lives are ruined. I don't know. I'm not saying that everybody becomes like this. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. You have to be very strong. They become drug addicts. They whatever it is, just to stay on that level of, if they increase their the way they live their life and they want to maintain that, then they become thieves. They become untrustworthy. There's all kinds of horrible stories we hear out there. Obviously, it's not everybody. But so one of the ideas, this wealth of information, having the Torah, having Torah wisdom, not retaining it for yourself, but giving it away, right? So that's going to be the second part. But no, there's two ways to read this. So we're going to stick with the first in the beginning. Basically, an arrogant person cannot learn. How can you learn, right? We said in Pirkei Avos, who's wise, right? Because we're trying to gain wisdom. That's the goal here. So if you're arrogant, how are you supposed to learn from everyone? As Pirkei Avos says, who's wise? One who learns from everybody. But if you think so much of yourself and so little of the other person, why would I even ask him a question or her a question? Why should I involve myself in trying to gain any wisdom from this person when I'm looking down at them, or I'm thinking I cannot get any gold, the wisdom nuggets from this person? So that's going to be, we call it the overall idea of how can you ever gain wisdom if you're arrogant? So basically, this idea is there are subtle traps of pride and arrogance that we have to examine so that we don't fall into this trap. So basically, the main thing is claiming credit for your accomplishments. Now, why not, right? Everyone has self-worth, self-esteem. So again, the main thing is one should definitely take pleasure. Take the pleasure in your accomplishments. And what greater pleasure is there than knowing you have a senior partner who loves you, who's an absolute I would say billionaire, but that's wrong to say. We're talking about trillionaire. We're talking about gazillionaire. We're talking about someone who has an unlimited budget, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, your senior partner. He's willing to write a check for you for anything you want. And I'm not joking. I'm totally serious here, right? I wish I could read my handwriting. I wrote a few notes for myself. I think there was one idea, and I don't want to be too political, but there was once a politician in recent history, and he got in big trouble for it. I totally understand why. He basically said, "You didn't build it." Now, I think his intent was good, but it came out all wrong. It was Obama, President Hussein Barack Obama. I think, not everyone's from all over the world, so you're not all Americans watching this. But I don't really understand what he was trying to say. Maybe it was from a communist point of view. But see, America has a certain greatness that they were creative. They put people on the moon. I mean, they went to space. I mean, an amazing accomplishments. And he really belittled them by saying, you didn't build it. Now, what was he trying to say? I'm not here to defend him. I think it was it was probably wrong and taken wrong and all that. But when someone accomplishes, like, there was people who before you set, they were trailblazers. You know what I mean? I don't really know all that much about all of the, scientists who discovered things, but there were scientists before them that set precedents and theories and proved their theories, and it could have been over hundreds of years.
Laid the groundwork. Yeah.
The infrastructure you have in America, okay, it needs to be rebuilt. But when you have some factory that's able to distribute some good product to the world, of course, someone built the trucks, someone else built the roads, someone else built the red lights, the traffic lights, and people are not getting in accidents while they're driving to deliver whatever it is. So of course, you didn't build it. Of course you built it. You have to take some pleasure. You have to take the pleasure. And I think he put a hole in everyone's tire, a flat tire. No, you have to take some pleasure. But the arrogance, the pride, that is where you're going to have a big problem. On another level, it's almost the antithesis of the Jewish people is Esav, right? Rome, right? Talk about when Israel's up, Rome is down. When Israel's down, Rome is up. Has nothing to do with Rome. It has to do with Israel, right? Rome, Esav, whoever, if you don't know who that is, that's Esau. I think it's how you pronounce it in English. I'm talking about Yaakov's brother.
Yeah,
right?
brother.
So when he was born hairy, right? I don't know exactly how they pronounce it in English. A hairy mantle. He was ruddy. He was full of hair, and the word Esav in Hebrew, it's almost like Esau, right? Ayin Shin Vav. He came out a soy. A soy means fully made. He was fully made, meaning like he had no room for growth. He came out like a fully hairy man, right? Like no growth. There's no total arrogance. Can you imagine? You're like, I don't know, a couple hours born, and you're looking at this baby. It's fully hairy, fully, looked like a man. Looked like
a little abnormal. Yeah.
But a soy, Esav, has a certain arrogance. Obviously, we're not talking about every single person who comes from Esav, but we're talking about the general trait of that nation. And Christianity comes from that. So I don't know how that fits in, but I'm sure someone would have an idea. But basically, it's a certain arrogance that we haven't made. There's nothing we have to do. We're fully developed. And that, I think, when we talk about the antithesis, the opposite of the Jewish people. Another, like I already mentioned, the Pirkei Avot says, who is wise? One who learns from every man. Oops, 1 second. I lost my papers here. Which Mishnah is that? That would be in chapter 4, Mishnah 1. Ben Zoma would say, who is wise? One who learns from every man. In Hebrew, just to know, Ezu Chacham Haloi Made Mikol Adam. And there's a verse in Psalms 119, chapter 119, verse 99. You want to read it, or you want me to read it?
I'll pull it up, Rabbi. Give me a second here. Psalm 119. And what verse?
99.
Scrolling down here. 99 says, "From all my teachers I gained understanding, for your testimonies are my conversation."
I mean, I understand what it says about from all my teachers. We're talking about everyone is your teacher, right? You walk down the street, you look like, okay, maybe he's disheveled, maybe he looks like a bum, maybe he looks uneducated. But
Maybe
everyone
he's
has
gone
an
through something,
experience. Everyone has some wisdom to share, right? Especially, hopefully, the older you are, the more wise you become. Hopefully, it's not always the case, but hopefully. Back into my overall overview. And so basically, if someone is arrogant and very prideful, they wouldn't be interested in ideas from other people. Also, it causes complacency. As I mentioned about Aesop, you feel you already have everything. You know, what's left? What is left to learn? I know
Right.
it all. Now, that's going to lead us to another idea, and that is in Alcoholics Anonymous, or 12-step programs, there is a very interesting idea, and that is an idea that we are not God. Right? I don't know, a lot of problems exist with, addictions of all kind. I'm just looking for a certain thing on my computer. I'm not having an easy time here. Let's see, maybe it's here. Here. Okay, so there's a book called Not God. It's written by Ernest Kurtz. It's a history of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just found this on the browser when I looked in Not God, because when I was involved with, let's say, recovery, investigating recovery and going through process myself. So one of my mentors basically was explaining this philosophy called Not God. And I don't remember who he was quoting, but a much earlier philosopher. I'm not sure if it was Carl Jung. But basically, the idea is that when someone is involved in addiction, I mean, they're in such denial. It's like idol worship. They really believe that they're God. Now, they won't say it, but they think that they're all powerful and they don't need any help from anybody else. And nobody can tell them what to do. I mean, it's a real problem with arrogance. But in order to begin a recovery process, you basically have to come to the conclusion, whatever I'm doing ain't working. It's not working. So basically, you kind of swallow, I guess, I don't remember, it's the red pill or the blue pill in the Matrix, but you basically need to swallow the pill of truth, right? The hard pill of truth that you are not God, right? Because basically, it's idol worship. You know, this arrogance and this pride, it's only going to kill you. You know, what do they call it? The families come and they try to
Interventions.
Have an intervention with you. And usually, I shouldn't say usually, but at some point before the intervention, for sure, the person is in denial. And that's why they come to that point where they figure, listen, this is like our last chance. You have to know that we love you and that we are objectively, it's not subjective anymore. We're objectively all together in this, and we feel that you're damaging yourself. Of course, you're damaging others. And you have to know you're not God. So I'm going to lead into this other idea. And I mentioned in the beginning how we are a partner with God. Now, I've spoken about this idea of the 72-letter name of God, which really means it's a 72 triplets. There's actually 72 three-letter names of God. If you want to investigate it, it's in Exodus chapter 14, verses 19, 20, and 21. How does it work? I've already expressed it before, but I'll review it. You take the first letter of, actually, let me just explain. These are the three verses that are in, back-to-back, ritzuf, consecutive verses that have 72 letters. I never checked to see if there were any other verses that have 72
Exodus
letters.
chapter 14, verses 19, 20, and 21.
Yeah, 19, 20, 21. These three consecutive verses have 70. Just reading the verses themselves are absolutely fascinating to see the glory of God saving the Jewish people.
Okay, 19 says, "Then the angel of Hashem who had been going in front of the Israelite camp, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved away from in front of them and stood behind them. And he came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there were the cloud and the darkness, and it illuminated the night, and one did not draw near the other all night long. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord led the sea with the strong east wind all night, and he made the sea into dry land, and the waters split.
Like when you really meditate on these verses, we're talking about like the ultimate in salvation, right? When you really, but we're not going to deal with the verses themselves, okay? You read it, you can meditate on it, and it's absolutely fascinating. But it's almost like scientific. The Torah is a code. So how does the three-letter names, the 72 three-letter names of God work? You take the first letter in verse 19, the last letter in verse 20, and then the first letter in verse 21. That's name number one. Then name number two is the second letter in the first and third verse, with the second to the last letter in the middle verse, and you go all the way through. Now you have a chart. You have 72 three-letter names of God. Now, if you break it in half, you're talking about verses 1 through 36, and then 37 to 72. So name number 1 and name number 37 are going to be significant. And so the word is ani. Ani is going to be the 37th name, and Vahu is going to be the first name. So this is what we say, Ani Vahu Hoshiana. What are we saying on Sukkot when we're shaking Hoshiana, Hoshana, right? I mean, you see those Christian videos of J.C. Penney, walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and they're waving these palms. Well, they got it from us. This is what we do. We shake the palms, and we say, Ani Vuhu Hoshiana. What are we saying? Ani, I, and he. Save us now. Ani is me. I. Vuhu, and him. Who's him? Well, it's either God and me, or it's me and God. We're partners. We're partners in the salvation. Don't you get it, right? So keep this in mind. This is the when you break up the name exactly in half, meaning the first of a series of 72, and then, of course, the 37th, right? In other words, as you break it down into two charts, you have one big chart of the 72-letter names, and then you just break it in half, number 1 and then number 37. This is Ani Vahu. Okay, it's like an unbelievable concept that how do we not remember that we have a senior partner? He's a senior partner, right? Not us. And that's the gist of it, to remember that he's got more experience, more wisdom, more money, more everything, and he's allowed me to be his partner. So I have to keep that modesty, that humility in check. What about natural habits? I mean, natural tendencies that we have, whether let's think about a genius, right? You got a guy who can, what do they call that? Photographic memory. Is that a gift? Okay, there are people who can build and build these natural talents. But you know what? A lot of them come naturally, and we should take pleasure, not pride. It's a very important thing, because first of all, I think in modesty itself, you don't want an ayin hara. You don't want people looking at you with jealousy. So even if you have these natural talents, I don't think it's a good idea to go around and try to, especially take credit for some of these things. Take pleasure. If God gave you a good constitution, your parents, maybe your father, I don't know, whatever, your parents and your grandparents, they were healthy and they were strong. So then you inherited it. And you maintained it, and you toned it down, so to speak. You know what I mean? You did your exercises. You constantly, eat well and whatever. Okay, so take pleasure in your part. But remember who gave it to you, right? When you're a genius and you have photographic memory. So, again, we're not talking about the person that built it up from scratch, and that's a possibility. But take pleasure. Don't take pride. That'll ruin you. Same thing, all your accomplishments.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and there's some really fascinating examples that he gives. So now I want to go to the book itself and go through some of his ideas and some of his stories that he tells. Imagine you won $1 million lottery. Okay. I mean, I do know people that play the numbers games very seriously. And if they would win, which they usually don't, but if they would win, they would probably take credit. Oh my God, I got the right numbers. But what about all the other
numbers came in, yeah.
Did you play that same number through your whole life? I mean, it was that counter that I went to. It was, that time, they're looking on their watch. There's so many variables of why you won that you cannot take credit. Can you imagine you're boasting, attributing your wealth, your new wealth, to your intelligence? I'm going to call it luck. I don't know. We don't like the word luck. Obviously, it was Hashem that caused it to happen. But at least, why take credit? I mean, it's just like the most ridiculous thing that you're going to hold this winning lottery ticket and say it was because of me. I mean, instead, thank the Almighty. Thank Hashem. Right? You don't take pride in winning the lottery, but take pleasure in the gift that the Almighty has given you. Right? This idea of taking pleasure, not pride, is going to always be the appropriate response to any of the blessings we have, especially for our natural talents, even our accomplishments, and of course our righteous acts. We're going to get into this idea that this is why God created you, to do the Torah and the mitzvahs, right? For the non-Jew, you're also talking about whatever Torah and mitzvahs that you have. Let's explore this idea of Eino, as we said, Eino Maxik Tova Liatzmo. Basically, it means not taking credit for your talents and accomplishments. This applies to everything in life. Okay, I think we talked enough about the natural talents, but he does give some interesting examples. Let's say, for example, DNA is inherited. So there are certain people that have a good constitution. They claim they have an iron stomach. They never get sick. They never got food poisoning. I mean, imagine you have a roommate or you're in college or you have a friend. He says, I would never say this. It might be true. It might be true about me. I rarely get sick. What am I going to go around and give myself an ayin hara? Okay, an ayin hara, people might not know what that means, but it's called the evil eye. You don't want to get people jealous. You don't need that kind of attention for negativity to come into your life by boasting about these things that you didn't even do anything about. If you don't get sick, it's because God gave you, I don't know, maybe you were young, you ate all the dirt off the floor. I have no idea what causes someone to have sometimes a good constitution, strong immune system, other than what Hashem granted him or her, right? What about people with really good looks, right? Flowing hair, high cheekbones. Some people are very naturally just very intelligent. This is an easy trap to fall into. I think it's something you did. The main thing, again, is take pleasure, not pride. It's actually irrational to take credit for them. Now, what about just the general? You should take pride in your accomplishments. Pride. But not, I'm sorry. We end up taking pride, which is wrong, but there's a certain, like I said, a certain pleasure, and there is a certain amount of pride, which should help, a healthy type of pride, that if it's not arrogant, then that's good. So the idea is that, no, you couldn't have done it by yourself, right? That you were given God-given skills and resources. If you didn't have this, you wouldn't have been able to achieve it. I just wrote a side note for myself to mention what President Obama said. You didn't build it. I just couldn't believe that he said this. It takes all the air out of the tires. You know what I mean? But of course, you have to have a certain amount of, I don't know if pride's the word, a certain amount of, and it's not just pleasure, but it's a certain knowing that you have the senior partner who gave you the gift. Baruch Hashem, right? How many times do we say Baruch Hashem every day? Should say it 100 times a day, if you ask me. The Rosh Hashiva mentions, consider all the support and help you received along the way that made your accomplishment possible. Many people contributed to your success, including your parents, teachers, and mentors. Imagine, the fact that you could read and write, and I don't know who's listening to this, but imagine you could read and write. Hopefully everyone listening to is in this position. Well, guess what? You had parents who pushed you, who said, Yeah, you can go and play, street hockey after school, but you have to first do your homework. Or your teachers that, gave you assignments and then like really checked with you and gave you personal attention. You'll remember that teacher for the rest of your life that motivated you. It's true that you did it, but you did have help. You had motivation. Maybe your parents even hired tutors, or the school itself matched you up with the right, I don't know, older student or whatever it was. So you have a lot of hakaras hatov, a lot of gratitude for Hashem arranging this. A lot of hakaras hatov to your teachers and your parents. Don't forget that. In other words, there is a certain pride knowing I can read and write, but make sure it doesn't fall into arrogance. Arrogance will blind you. Here's an example. I mean, sometimes we take things for granted, but, nobody's going to say, look, I got a check for $5,000 today, and you know what I did with it? I put it in the bank. Well, that's what you're supposed to do with it. So also, when you're supposed to say how smart you are, look, sometimes that is how it happens. But if someone tells you this, you look at them dumbfounded. It's patently absurd to take pride in depositing the check, because that was a sensible and rational thing to do. So too, using your time, your abilities, your efforts to accomplish things, it's rational to do this. So don't take any, don't justify it with pride. Just take pleasure in knowing you're using your time wisely, and perhaps thank your parents or your teachers or whoever mentored you in making sure that you had good time management skills. On the other side, don't take pride in avoiding self-destructive behavior. The example he gives, like, oh my God, I was at the dinner table and I had this really sharp knife and I just felt like cutting myself and cutting my nose off, so I held it back. I mean, come on, this is like a ridiculous thing, right? So, of course, you're going to hold. It's not a sane thing to do, to want to cut your nose off, right? And you're going to take pride in this. Be careful. It's obviously ridiculous. It doesn't make sense to boast about not hurting yourself. Now, the truth is, if someone had been a habitual, whether it's drug addict, gambler, look, there is a point where you do, again, but because you had help from Hashem, you had help from your friends, you had help from your mentors. There is a certain amount of self-worth and self-esteem that you should have, a healthy amount, to know that you overcame, but you didn't do it yourself. Just keep this in mind. Someone gets freed from prison. I shouldn't say freed, a breakout. Somebody delivered to him in the cake a file, right? Remember those old movies? How did the guy get out of prison? Or someone came with a very strong machine and came to the outside wall of the prison and hooked up the chains and then pulled off, the window or whatever, broke down the wall. When you're in prison and you're able to escape, usually it's because someone from the outside sprung you, if that's a word. They freed you. So too, when you're in, God forbid, like coming through a dark place, these addictions or any kind of dark place, a very bad character trait that you had an extremely hard time overcoming, if you did overcome it, you should take pleasure in the fact that you were a partner, but you have a senior partner who really, you needed someone from the outside to free you. Now he speaks about the idea of self-righteous pride. Arrogance about one's goodness is the most insidious and dangerous form of pride. Nothing leads to more destruction than the ideologue who is so utterly convinced that his righteousness that paints all of his actions, even the most evil, with the brush of the greater good. And he mentions some names. They're all Yamak Shemo v'Zichron. Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and other despots justified the murder of millions of innocent people, all in the name of a higher ideal and the betterment of humanity. Even for the person who's truly performing good deeds and servicing mankind, there's no room for arrogance. Now, this is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, and this is really, I think, where the words themselves come from. Even though this is in the 48 ways, the idea of don't machzik, don't retain or don't give yourself credit. It says in Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, it depends which version you're using. It's number 8 in my book. But it says, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai. He used to say, if you have learned much Torah, which hopefully many people here watching this, they're into Torah, it says, do not take credit for yourself. It is for this that you have been formed. In other words, you were created to obey the Creator, have obedience, to follow the Creator, to love the Creator, and to work on your character. All this, whatever Torah does for you, whether it teaches you how to do the mitzvahs, whether it teaches you how to work on your character and everything in between, well, what are you going to do? So you accomplished a lot in the Torah world, learning and accomplishment. Do not take credit for yourself. So those are the exact words. Al tachzik tov li'atzmecha. Now, I mentioned in the very beginning, there's another way to look at, don't retain this goodness for yourself. The Torah is called good. So the Torah that you learn, I'm telling you, you want to give it away. Don't retain it for yourself. This is the most valuable thing. This is more than any bank account you could ever have, right? This is priceless. The wisdom you learn, give it away, share it with people you run into. So we'll talk about that also, okay? So this is like, it fits in well. If you've learned much Torah, do not take credit for yourself, because this is what you're created to do. Think about it like this. Don't retain it for yourself, because you should give it away. This is what you were created to do. We're going to talk more about this. Hopefully we have time and we'll go on with it. Taking credit for performing mitzvahs places your focus on yourself. Like, oh yeah, I did this, and I did this chesed, and I did this kindness, and I gave to this charity, and I spent X amount of hours in this soup kitchen. This is what you were created to do. Don't take credit. Take pleasure in the fact that you were able to do this, that Hashem gave the opportunity, that you're, I'm not saying wealthy enough to, but you are, okay enough to, that you didn't have to, if you're working 8 hours a day on, let's say, not even 8 hours, you have 2 jobs. One is 8 hours, the other is 6 to 8 hours. Can you imagine? There are people, they have 2-3 jobs just to stay. They're not going to be able to really participate that much in this chesed projects, right? But you know what? If Hashem grants you a little bit of reprieve and you're able to pay your bills, so you might find time. And so you thank Hashem for giving the opportunity to serve Him. It's a taking pleasure in your accomplishments and not doing it arrogantly. So basically, I'll just repeat. Taking credit and performing mitzvahs places your focus on yourself, when the focus should really be on attaching yourself to Hashem, the will of the Creator, which obviously dwarfs all other needs and considerations. Now, another idea, it's not the last one, but beware of arrogant people. First of all, insanity is contagious. When you're around very arrogant people, hopefully their attributes, their attitudes should not wear off. But arrogant people are consumed with themselves, and they don't respect or value other people. Of course, they're looking down at everyone around them. Their only consideration is what they desire. Now, we have to think about ourselves. We're also selfish. We're also arrogant. So we want to be selfless. We want to be available. We want to be a service to the Creator, right? And what did these arrogant people do? When they look at other people, they're just tools. They're just, meat. They're to be used, so to speak. And arrogant people don't recognize other people are really human beings, And of course, we want to get out of that. We don't want to think of other people as just meat or, objects to be used.
Tools. Yeah.
Tool. And they have no compunction about stepping on others, hurting them, or even casting them aside. I think I wanted to look up narcissism. The way he describes this, I'm not an expert on these terms, but from the little that I know about narcissism, maybe someone could write in the comments or let us know. He mentions about an arrogant person can destroy their own spouse or their children, and who exist only to be a source of gratification and to derive pleasure from. In other words, the person is only using everyone else for their own selfish needs. They're unable to recognize their own children's humanity, and they don't give their children any self worth, and he can make them feel worthless unless they live up to that person's expectations and serving and self-serving needs. The arrogant person looks down on others and is willing to walk all over them if there are obstacles in his path. So correct me, I don't know, a narcissist or narcissism, pride leads to contempt, while we know that humility leads to compassion and gratitude. And by the way, I mean, God says, and I'll tell you where he says it, in Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 5. If you want to read that.
1 second, Rabbi. Deuteronomy 13, verse 5 reads, "You shall follow the Lord your God. Fear him, keep his commandments, heed his voice, worship him, and cleave to him."
Now, in the Hebrew, it's Achrei Hashem Elokeichem Telechu. You should walk. So we understand this means follow his Torah, follow God's Torah, but also his character traits. And at the end of the verse, when it says cleave to him, uvo tidbakun, dvekas Hashem, cleaving, that intimacy. Again, the whole Torah, and what do we know about God? We know about God from the Torah. Follow his behaviors. We don't always, God's invisible, he's beyond our understanding, but what's the very first thing he did in the Torah? Well, besides creating man and bringing him his wife, which is a great chesed, a great kindness, right? He clothed the naked. And at the very end, right, Moses dies. Nobody's going to know where he's buried. Well, who buried him? God himself, burying the dead. You see, the whole book is about chesed, kindness to others. And what we learn is, you want to know what a book is about? Read the first chapter, read the last chapter, and you're going to figure out everything in between is basically surrounding that concept. Well, that's what the Torah is. The Torah is an instruction manual of how to follow God's ways, and his ways are ways of kindness. The very first thing he did was clothe the naked, and he helped bury the dead. This is what we have to do. So in the comment on Rashi, he mentions, what does it mean to cleave to him? Cleave to his ways, bestow kindness, bury the dead, visit the sick, right? He visited Abraham. That's somewhere in the middle, right? Well, beginning of Genesis, but it's not in the first paragraph. It's not in the last paragraph. But you want to follow his behaviors. So this is, and Hashem, we mentioned before, the humility of Hashem. Where you find his greatness, that's where you find his humility. I want to explain the gematria, how gematria works. Every letter has a value. For example, Aleph is 1, Bet is 2. You go on, right? So Pei is 80, Tzaddik is 90, Kuf is 100. Every letter has a number. You can easily find these on, Google, gematria, how it works. There are other number systems. Gematria is not like a singular system. There's different levels. So there's also a thing called the milui, the way that the fullness of the letter. So just like Aleph, which is the single letter, also has a gematria called its fullness, which means Aleph Lamed Pei, the letter spelled out. Even though you say Gimel Mem Lamed, there's a word that you can describe the letter. So now you take the fullness of every one of the letters, and you can find a chart on this as well, where every letter, like Aleph is 111, because Aleph Lamed Pei. It adds up, trust me, you can do your math, 111. Bet is 412. All the numbers are very high, even though we said they're 1 through 100 or 1 through 400, right? But because the last few letters are in the multiples of hundreds. But each letter is a very small number, starting from 1 to 10, and then multiples of tens. So when you look at the value of the fullness, it's God's own name, Yud and Hey and Vav. I don't even have to mention the second Hey, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. They're the smallest of these miloi. In other words, God's greatness is within his name, right? We trust in him, his name, in his kindness. And yet, what is he? He obviously developed the whole world, created the whole world, developed languages, the holy language, the holy tongue, Hebrew. The name itself, Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, it says where you find his greatness, you find his humility in the own creation of this world, which language has. It says he spoke and created the world. The language itself that he created, his own name is the smallest. And I say the smallest. You could take any word, take a dictionary, and the smallest value of the Miloi is always going to be his name, no matter what, because the Yud and the Hey and the Vav are like miles away in terms of the value of number. It's the smallest numbers of all the letters. You can look at it on the chart, and you see any combination of any letter, any word will always be twice, 3, 4 times whatever Hashem's name is. It's unbelievable. It's just absolutely fascinating. So we have to know how. It's really hard to get your head around. Where you find his greatness, you find his humility, and that's just an example. But we have to follow his way to be humble. So imagine taking all this pride and arrogance in our accomplishments. We have a senior partner who's just unbelievable. He's just so good to us. Now the next idea is just it's an obstacle to wisdom, right? If again, these are the 48 ways to wisdom. So pride, or here arrogance, is one of the biggest obstacles to attaining wisdom. And I mentioned already in Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, Mishnah 1, where who is wise? One who learns from everyone. Okay, we talked about that. We recognize the damage that pride leaves in its wake, right? Arrogance prevents a person from admitting he's wrong and learning that which he doesn't know yet, since he mistakenly believes he knows everything, or almost everything. Instead of being concerned with discovering the truth, the person turns interchanges of ideas into sensitive battlefields where everything is taken personally, stuck in a defensive mode, can't even hear what's being said. And I'm sure we've all experienced our own lives, bits and pieces of this. Some are more exaggerated, some are more toned down. It depends on our own refinement. But we hit a rocky road sometimes. So we have to work on this. We all have to work on it. It's not just left to those people that we can all objectively say are arrogant. We all experience arrogance in our life. Whereas a humble person is open to being shown that he's wrong sometimes, and takes pleasure in getting closer to the truth and learning to do the right thing. Just keep this in mind. When Jews sit and learn in a Beit Midrash, in a study hall, you always see what they call the Chavruta system. This is the traditional system. You have two people battling it over. If you're going to sit by yourself, you're going to make mistakes. And you're going to solidify those mistakes by thinking you're right. But when you're sitting with someone else and you're reading the text and you're trying to explain it, you have somebody, and hopefully you trust them, and they're not just there to get you, right? They'll explain to you, no, that's not how to read it. There's a comma here. This is the emphasis of the verse. This is really what it means. This is the insight. I'm sure that it's, and you back it up and you say, how do you know? This is how you exchange ideas. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, right? They was famous chavrusas. I don't want to go into the whole story, how they became. It's an absolutely fascinating story. Maybe I will. Reish Lakish was head of the bandits. I mean, he became about Shuli. He wasn't religious. Apparently, he was hanging out in the trees, in the forest. Everybody he saw down below that was vulnerable, he had his band of bandits, and they came and they would steal. And it wasn't like Robin Hood, who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. I think he kept it, right? Anyway, but he was a powerful man, and he was into wealth for the wrong reasons, greed or whatever, and he was into beauty. And he saw Rabbi Yochanan in a pond or some kind of a lake, and he thought Rabbi Yochanan was a woman. Rabbi Yochanan, I'm not sure if he had long hair, but he was he was very white. He had a certain glow, and I think he was very heavy, okay? So basically, I don't know, he must have thought he was a woman, so he jumps into this lake, I guess to be intimate with Rabbi Yochanan, not knowing it was a man. And of course, now he realizes Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan realized why this head of the bandits came to attach himself, so to speak. And he said, I see you're very powerful. You have a lot of potential. And you know what? I see you're into beauty. What if I gave you my sister to marry, but on condition that you sit and study Torah? And you know what? Reish Lakish was willing and ready, and he said, you know what, I'll do it. And anyway, so in the I'm not going to skip through the whole story, but basically that was an amazing person. He became really strong in Torah, became one of the greatest rabbis that ever lived at the time. And the story concludes, what I'm trying to say is that when they became chavrusas, they became learning partners. And when Reish Lakish died, so they brought in several different study partners for Rabbi Yochanan. And everyone he was learning with seemed to agree with him. Now, he was a very smart guy. He was extremely learned. He was the greatest rabbi. But he was not interested in a yes man. He was not interested in someone who was going to sit across from him and, I guess, keep his mouth shut and not. He was open to the criticism. He was extremely humble, and he wanted the truth. And the only way to get to that was to battle for the truth in obviously a very dignified way, not to insult and put the other person down. But anyway, so be grateful to your teachers. It would be arrogant to say, when your teacher tells you something, oh, this is so simple, I knew it all along. If someone is taking time to teach you, acknowledge his effort and express your gratitude. Now, what's the greatest medicine against arrogance? What happens if a big talker, you're a big talker, let's say, and even a bigger person, a great, knowledgeable, righteous person walks in the room, you're going to shut your mouth. You are going to be so humbled. I mean, I think I said it last week, or the week before. The guy who opens his mouth, like when you open your mouth, sometimes it's better to keep your mouth shut, because when you open your mouth, you show everybody how stupid you are, right? So imagine this genius. You're in the presence of like an Albert Einstein, and you're going to tell over some theory of quantum mechanics or gravity. This is the time and opportunity to sit and absorb. So the arrogance is unbelievable. So the best medicine against arrogance is the realization that God put us on the earth to achieve great things. Acknowledging this obligation to attain greatness makes you realize that no matter what you've done, you have not yet reached, you haven't even begun to fulfill your potential. I spoke about Ani Vahu. I'm a partner with him. I have this life force called God who's given me and is willing to give me such greatness. Now, I want to mention, because we just passed Tu B'Av. I don't want to digress too much, but I do want to say this unbelievable idea. It's an unbelievable idea. There's a little bit of an argument, a discussion in the Gemara. When was the world really created? Was it created in what we call Rosh Hashanah, in the 7th month? It's amazing, it's the 7th month. Why would God ever create a world in the 7th month? Wouldn't he create it in Nisan, what we call the 1st month, the springtime? An amazing discussion in the Gemara. I'm not sure the Gemara actually concludes, but Tosfos does and other people do, that the truth is it was really created in Nisan. And yet we celebrate, let's just say Rosh Hashanah, we call Rosh Hashanah, in the 7th month. Why is that? So, first of all, there's another idea that 40 days before a person, usually people express before they're born, but it doesn't really mean that. It says before they're conceived. Before they're conceived, a voice comes out and says, this person is going to marry this person. That's amazing. Now, again, back to the idea that who's going to be rich, who's going to be strong, who's going to be healthy, how long you're going to live. A lot of this is decided before you're even born. Who you're going to marry. Unbelievable. So just think about this a second. 40 days before conception. Now, back to the original discussion. When was the world actually created? I'm going to cut it really short. The world was created in Nisan. When was it conceived? It was conceived on Rosh Hashanah. In other words, God thought about creating the world. When? 40 days before. In other words, it was conceived on Rosh Hashanah and came into being in Nisan, Pesach time. But what's 40 days before that? 40 days before this, when the voice goes out and says, this person's going to marry that person, that means the original point of all potential came 40 days before the actual conception. I hope you're following me. 40 days before Rosh Hashanah is Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av. So in other words, we say, I mean, it's a holiday. It's an actual religious. Rabbi Breitowitz spoke about it in his last shir, the amazing history of what we call Tu B'Av. So just keep this in mind. It's an amazing idea. That on the flip side, according to the opinion, that the world was actually created in Tishrei, which is the 7th month, so that it was conceived when? It was conceived in Nisan. And what's 40 days before the 1st of Nisan? Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat. Now, let me just, I know that you're trying to do the math and you think I'm making a mistake. I should have mentioned that it's not really the 1st of Nisan nor the 1st of Tishrei, but it's 5 days before. Because what you're doing is like this. We say man was created on the 6th day of creation, but the world was created on the 25th of Elul, or now we're doing the flip side, it was on the 25th of Adar, and then it was created on the 1st of Nisan. So that's how you came out to the 40 days. So if anybody was doing the math and said, hey, Rabbi, it ain't coming out, I forgot to mention this important fact. Okay, so I hope you're all bearing with me. So just think about what happens on Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is when the trees are bare, but it's a new year for the trees. The new year is because when the sap is beginning behind the scenes to draw up, which is eventually going to feed or nourish the leaves that are about to come, or the fruits that haven't yet even developed. But it's all the potential. The potential is there that we have to tap into this potential. And that's why, for those who are watching this, non-Jews, on Shabbat, on Tu B'Av, this is the day to pray. This is the day to really try to tap into that potential of the coming year that's going to cross over on Rosh Hashanah. And that's basically how we hold. As I mentioned, that we actually hold the world was actually physically created in Nisan, that the world was only conceived of in Tishrei, and 40 days before that is today. So this is where all the potential, you can really tap into the potential. So anyway, this is something that we should know, that we have unbelievable, untapped potential. And so in other words, if you came out like Esav, thinking, I am a self-made, I am fully, I have no growth. There's nothing to grow. It's fully grown. So convert yourself from an Esav to a true, I'm going to say a Ger Toshav / Ben Noach, maybe a convert to Judaism, anything but an Esav, right? I mean, or as Rabbi Kessin speaks about the Tov Sheba Esav, at least know that there's a possibility of the good of Esav through Tshuva. Okay, so I hope that was interesting ideas. I do want to speak a little bit about what I mentioned in the beginning, but don't retaining this, give it away. How did I want to get to that point? I do speak many times about this one idea, and I think it falls in line very nicely with what we call the Kriyat Shema. But I mentioned to the listeners here on your station before that every one of the 613 mitzvahs all have a verse. Everyone has a very succinct verse that describes, right, the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, the waving of the lulav and the esrog on Sukkot, whatever it is. There's mitzvahs are very descriptive of what it is. So many Jews, obviously, they know, oh yeah, it's a big mitzvah to learn Torah. When I ask Jews who are not that knowledgeable, well, where's the verse? We all know it's a big mitzvah. They usually point to Joshua, where it says you should meditate in it day and night. Very nice, but nobody brings that as the verse, as the source, because the verse, whatever source, has to be from the 5 books of Moses. You don't bring me from Psalms, don't bring me from Proverbs, don't bring me from any of the prophets. The real source is one of the 613 mitzvahs has to come from the 5 books of Moses. So the source they bring is from Joshua. No, let's go to the source in the Torah, and it's in the Shema itself. It says, "You shall teach your son. Vishinantam livanecha." You shall teach your son. How does teaching have to do with learning? I asked, what's the mitzvah to learn? Oh, you're going to show me, and it's to do with teaching? So what's the logic behind it? Yes, it's true that it says you shall teach Torah to your sons. And if you don't have sons, to your neighbors. All your students are like children. Because the only way to teach is to learn. You have to learn first. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because this week's Parsha, we just read Va'et Hanan, the Shema is in the Parsha. And we go through, there's actually 3 paragraphs. That's the first paragraph is in our week's Parsha. Then the second paragraph is in next week's Parsha. And the third paragraph, believe it or not, is back in Numbers. So there's no real order to it. And the Gemara wants to know, well, what's the order? Why is it the order? And one of the ideas brought down is that in the first paragraph, it speaks about learning, right? It does. We're going to call that teaching Torah, but it's learning Torah. But the truth is, it's singular. It's singular. The first paragraph is singular. The second paragraph is actually plural. And the second paragraph is actually talking about going and teaching also as well, meaning learning and teaching. And then in the third paragraph, it's talking about doing. And we have an order. The most important thing in the beginning, in your own personal development, is to learn. But there's a next step, and that is to do what? To teach. And then the third step is to do. And we talk about doing is the ultimate goal of learning anyway. So from learning, then teaching, and then doing, there's a progression. And that is an important lesson we learn in this week's Parsha. So in terms of, we spoke about this so many times, but in terms of who did I learn the most from? They asked the rabbis, who did you learn the most from? So you would think people are going to say, yeah, my rabbis, I sat in this professor's class, or I went to Einstein, and I learned unbelievable stuff. No, I learned a tremendous amount from my teachers. It's true, but I even learned more from my colleagues, that chavruta, that study partner. And who did I learn the absolutely most from? My students. So, again, where's the arrogance? Where's the arrogance? Can you imagine the professor? Unbelievable arrogance. You think they'd learn anything from their students? You think they would even admit it? Unbelievable. So this, I hope I got this idea. Remember, the idea was not taking credit, not claiming credit. And if you're going to say I learned the most from my students, I don't know, maybe the university is going to say, hey, we want our money back from paying you all this money. You're the professor and you're learning from your students. Well, they got the whole thing wrong. If they understand anything about education, they would understand, hopefully, what I just said and expressed, that this person learned the most from his students because of the questions that they would ask, required me as a professor to go back and re-examine what I taught them, express it in a clearer language, perhaps even before trying to guess what their questions might be, knowing that I have to know the information before I get up on that podium or that stage or in front of however many students, could be 5 students or 500 students, right? I want to make a fool of myself. I better know my stuff well. So however it is, arrogance is definitely something that prevents wisdom. Bezrat Hashem, we learned something new. Well, we reviewed that that which we know already. Some of this is extremely common sense, but it's a good time to review. And I apologize to the Rabbi. I don't give it over in any in any sense like he did with his charisma, but we did the best we can. Okay, so I don't
think you did an awesome job. Somebody online named Metamorphosis says, loves these lectures. Where can I ask questions as a Noahide? And I said, well, ask, and I'll try to get it in as long as it's relevant and not off topic. So I'm waiting to see if he sends a question here, Rabbi. But also, you can always reach out to Rabbi Poston at Yiboneh.com. Rabbi, is there a contact you page, anything there on Yiboneh.com?
I'm going to I'll type in my email address right now. So they know Yiboneh.com, but here I'll put in Aaron Aaron, AARON, DOVID, @Yiboneh.com. Let's see. If I hit that, let's see what happens. Did it pop up?
We're on YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
Okay, you know what I think I have to do? I think I have to make spaces.
Nope, there it is. I got her.
Came up?
Okay, yep, I got it up there. Well, hopefully you don't get inundated with trolls. I mean, folks, be kind when you're speaking with the rabbi. I mean, we appreciate everything he does and shares, and we don't want those with agendas to be wasting such a busy man's time. His time is so valuable, and he's doing so much work, and we're thankful. Also, last shout out to those on our Roku station. You can always find more of Rabbi Aaron David Poston's material at Yiboneh.com. Beautiful, beautiful material. His YouTube page is just about ready to roll 1 million views in just over 6 years. Beautiful. Toda, Rabbi. Excellent work for, that's such a large number in a short period of time. I know that Rabbi Breitowitz, profound speaker, and I know he gets plenty of views, but this is cumulative. You're doing great work, and you're inspirational to me, and I'm thankful that you're doing these. My friend Barbara in Germany, she says, yes, she's thankful too. Just, be encouraged.
Just to put into practice.
Take pleasure, as you said today.
I didn't
Take
do
pleasure.
it myself, right? It was the people like you who helped promote Yiboneh. I'm sure many of those views came as a result of that. So thank you very much also.
All right. So Hashem willing, are we tentatively on for next same time next week for part 30, or is your schedule?
I'll tell you, I have a huge Shabbaton, an extremely very busy Shabbos coming up, but I think that if I prepare properly, I should be able to give it over. So we'll do the best we can to be prepared.
Tentative? Yeah, well, I always try to tag you in advance by like Thursday to see if you're on or off. I mean, I don't want to promise anybody that you're going live, but I know that those that tune into this class are usually those that have more of an aptitude for study, and they want to hear what you've got to share, and it means a lot to them.
It's my birthday, Parsha. My wife's making a huge kiddush. We're having a lot of people for Shabbat.
Beautiful.
It's also our anniversary, and so we're doing quite a big celebration.
Yeah, a big deal.
So we're going to do the best we can because I believe in consistency. We'll talk about that when we get to it, one of the 48 ways also as well.
Awesome. Well, Rabbi, I appreciate it. So we're not sure if we're on for next week, but he says if you can prepare. I always advertise it well in advance out there on social media. We try to be consistent, and we're making good ground. I mean, we're almost coming up to part 30 of the 48 ways. It's been a long road, especially I love this series, and I'm looking for it. For those of you on Roku watching, I haven't uploaded yet, but Rabbi Poston did a beautiful book series called The 6 Constant Mitzvahs. And it was a beautiful, beautiful lesson series. He took the time to prepare and share with us, and I'll be getting that uploaded soon. It's just there's a lot of encoding involved in getting it transferred to play on the television station, and it takes up a lot of my time. But I have such joy, and if I didn't come to classes like this and get recharged myself, I don't know if I could keep going. But thank you, Rabbi Poston, for sharing and staying up so late in Jerusalem. It's now like it's going on 1 a.m. there in Jerusalem, and there you are still sharing live with the world. I'm so appreciative that some rabbis are willing to share the light of Torah out of the nation of Israel, and it's always exciting. So Hashem willing, we'll be back at the same time next week live. I'll make sure everybody knows well in advance. So until then, have a wonderful, wonderful week, folks.
Shavua tov.
מציון תמלא, יש שם שיר חדש